streets of Vancouver.
They think that you don't want to work. They think that you're lazy.
To Old Town Portland.
There's a lot of mental health and addiction crisis that we're experiencing.
To derelict ships on the Columbia River.
This exemplifies the broken dreams of many people.
We're taking a look at how our housing crisis is impacting different parts of the metro area and what leaders are trying to do about it. But first,
these kids, they don't got no problem posting pictures.
Is social media contributing to Portland's historic rise in shootings?
That incites this immediate violence, this immediate anger, this immediate response to retaliate.
How do we as a community address this so that this doesn't become a tool to lead to more destruction?
Here's the story.
Big topics tonight for sure. I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story. This is the show, if you're not familiar, where your questions and your comments are turned into content by our team. We have a huge team watching for your feedback right now. So email thestory@kgw.com. Use that hashtag, TheStoryKGW. Again, our staff is watching our social media channels and our email inbox as we speak. And with that in mind, we do want to get started specifically tonight with Portland's historic spike in gun violence, as you saw in that open. And you know, it's something that we've been focusing on all year. Now, since January, 73 people have died in homicides in Portland, and many of those homicides were shootings. They were gun violence. Each victim in each case has their own unique story of how they lived and how they died. But as we look for solutions, it's important to try and identify common factors that may be fueling this violence, like, for instance, social media. Here's investigative reporter Kyla Boshi.
This is part of our everyday life. It's how we communicate. And it's no secret that social media platforms have altered human behavior and the way we interact. Which leads us to this question. Is there a link between social media and Portland's gun violence? In some cases, yes.
Social media certainly plays a part.
Lieutenant Ken Dulio of Portland Police says disputes on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat have triggered some of the shootings.
That incites this immediate violence, this immediate anger, this immediate response to retaliate.
In mid-June, an argument on social media between two men and their respective girlfriends led to a late-night car chase and shooting in North Portland's St. John's neighborhood, according to court documents. Alexander Martinson died after being shot in the back of the head. He was 19 years old. A lot of the shootings involve trivial stuff. A comment or disrespectful post can erupt on social media and grow to involve a large group of people as rivals, explains community activist Royal Harris.
Once an interpersonal beef in Portland becomes something that can be seen or judged or commented on by people in Houston, Chicago, LA, Tacoma, it carries a whole new dimension because now our interpersonal beef isn't personal anymore.
And with lots of people looking at it and commenting on it, an online post can push young people to become impulsive, leading to violence.
And so for the kids who are on the fence, that's great chalkboard material for them because this is your friend they talking about, this is your brother they talking about, right? What you gonna do about it? I was an ex-gang member.
Gang veteran Lionel Irving warns social media can also help create new shooters by glamorizing guns and gang life. Facebook and Instagram, they're filled with photos and videos of young men flexing on social media.
When I was running the streets, it was a secret. You don't want nobody to know. But nowadays, these kids, they don't got no problem posting pictures.
And some of this isn't even real, which isn't surprising. It's social media. But some of these young men, I'm told, are borrowing a bunch of guns to make photos and videos, post them online, and look tough. Problem is, this is no game.
And a lot of us older cats always like to say, you know, there's this fantasy world where kids can go or young people can go on the internet and be whoever they want without realizing some of those disrespects have real world repercussions.
The challenge is interrupting this violence, especially in a world consumed with social media. It's not going away.
The question is, how do we as a community, how do we as parents, educators, leaders address this so that this doesn't become a tool to lead to more destruction?
Royal Harris suggests we focus on teaching young people, and I mean really young, how to handle conflict in person and online so they don't turn to a gun to try and settle a beef. We don't have an exact number of how many shootings in Portland are connected to social media, but we know it's part of the problem. Maybe a small part, yes. There are a lot of other factors. Easy access to guns, a breakdown in social services during the pandemic, limited policing, the list goes on and on. But as we tackle this issue, we're trying to look at it one question at a time to better understand gun violence, so hopefully we can come up with some solutions.
Our thanks to Kyle. Now to tonight's big story. It deals with our housing crisis. And to start, we want to shift our focus north to Vancouver. And we're doing this because several of you, frankly, kind of demanded it, including Mike. He wrote, "You have covered multiple places in Portland and the homeless there, but have you ever covered the homeless in Vancouver? We here north of the Columbia receive and depend on you for our news. But the majority of the news you present is Portland." Here's another. Okay, so we live in Vancouver. Do we not have a very large homeless problem? I know we do because we see them everywhere, but we never hear our mayor on the news addressing this issue. That email from an email with the handle Daywaif, no name included. Whoever you are, though, thank you very much. And thanks to Mike as well. With your questions in mind, we hit the road today. And as soon as we got off the interstate in Vancouver, we were greeted with this large camp. And frankly, we found, more of the same in downtown Vancouver. If you live in that city, none of this surprises you. The housing crisis is very visible there, just like it is in Portland, in Salem, and other cities throughout our viewing area. But all of this in mind, let's lend some specific context courtesy of statistics. According to the last government count conducted in January of 2020, so pre-pandemic, an estimated 916 people are homeless in Clark County. Now, for reference, that's about a quarter of the number of homeless people in Multnomah County. Nearly half live in shelters or transitional housing. The rest, 516, an estimation there, are unsheltered. That's a federal term. It means they literally live on the streets. And you might have seen in the news this week, Washington's eviction moratorium has expired. So housing officials in Vancouver and probably across the state are now worried that a wave of new people could become homeless soon. So case in point, here is what Vancouver's homeless response coordinator told me on Zoom earlier today.
I am worried. For a whole variety, nobody wants anyone to experience particularly unsheltered homelessness. But yeah, I am worried, particularly about the kind of folks who might end up, without ever having experienced homelessness, perhaps, finding themselves with nowhere to be. That's kind of my focus has always been on like the chronically homeless population, folks who've been outside for a very long time. Also not a good thing, but it's scary to know that we might have like families with children finding themselves with no shelter, no housing, who've never experienced that before.
I do want to say to Daywaif, by the way, we asked for Vancouver's mayor, but we were told Jamie Spinelli was the perfect person to talk to, and our thanks to her. So that in mind, what is the city of Vancouver doing? Well, shout out to your officials, by the way, for this website. If you're interested in how your city or how the city of Vancouver is handling the housing crisis, we highly recommend checking this out. It's beheardvancouver.org/homelessness response. beheardvancouver.org/homelessness response. It's where the city literally lists everything they're doing in detail to respond to this crisis. So we decided to show you one highlight. This is Vancouver's safe parking zone. It's a city-owned parking lot at the Evergreen Transit Center. And right now they're at capacity with more than 40 cars and RVs parked here, housing close to 70 adults and 10 kids. Earlier, we met some of them. This first couple you're about to meet says they lost their jobs and their housing during the pandemic.
This is amazing. If it wasn't for this, I don't know what we would have done. I don't know what we would have done.
They don't judge. A lot of people think you're homeless and not a place to stay. They just put you in this class of homeless people, then we're not all the same.
And they think that you don't want to work. They think that you don't want to do anything. They think that you're lazy. And it's like, no.
I met several people, 2 ladies here, their houses burnt down. That's why they're here. I met people at Safeway, just bought a camper shell for their pickup, I said, you guys going fishing or camping? They said, no, we have to live in this pickup. I see it every day.
And it's a great place. I mean, too bad there's only limited room, but because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be like, oh, I want to go there. And then they come here and they find out there's no room and they're like, ah. So if they had more places, that would be ideal. If the city's paying attention, this is what you need to do. I looked at the camera on purpose for that one.
Yeah, after that I said, solid PSA, Stanley, and he said, thank you. And by the way, Stanley, the city tells us they are paying attention and they're working to open something like that safe parking zone, but kind of minus the car factor. Earlier this year, Vancouver city officials vowed to open 3 what they're calling supportive campsites, basically organized homeless villages. And again, they want to open 3 by the new year, by 2022. But tonight, an update. They're having trouble finding land that's available, affordable, and frankly doesn't have other problems like flooding. So as a result, officials say they're now aiming to open just 1 campsite by the new year, with 2 more eventually to come. So not 3 by the new year, we're down to 1 now. We'll keep you posted on that. But you might remember the same thing has happened recently with Portland's planned homeless villages. They've announced sites for those, and then they had to scrap one when they discovered something wrong with that piece of property. Again, it was a floodplain. Then today, the Statesman Journal reported the same thing is happening in Salem. Little scene setter here. Back in September, the city council approved an outdoor organized homeless village on this city-owned lot along Wallace Road in Salem. But at the time, neighbors told us this. Does this flood?
It does flood a lot. Gets probably at least 1.5 foot, if not more.
Flooding, the common culprit. Well, today, the nonprofit that was supposed to manage that site told us in a statement, quote, the site has been found to be unfeasible for this project due to a lack of access to the ODOT parking lot and ground during the wet months of the year. Other sites are being explored. So to sum up, this story is clearly not unique. Homelessness is a regional problem, and cities across our viewing area, across our state, our region, and so on, are struggling to get people off the streets in a real, tangible, noticeable way. 3 local cities now, by our count, have recently vowed to open sanctioned, organized villages, and all 3, as of today, have then extended deadlines for those plans because, in short, there's not a ton of available inhabitable land. Any lots that fit that criteria would probably have something built on them by now. That being said, all 3 cities are refusing to admit defeat. So the villages or camps will open, they say. It's just a matter of when. We'll keep you posted. Now, without homeless villages or designated campsites, we all know what happens. People end up living basically wherever they can to find a place to stay, whether that's in a tent on the street or even in an abandoned boat. In July, we showed you what happened to 2 old military vessels on the Columbia River. Take a look.
All right, there.
Left abandoned, forgotten. Massive military vessels that once served our country, now serving as shelter for the homeless on the Columbia River near Hayden Island.
It's kind of disrespectful in a way of what's happened to them.
It's pretty much the Wild West out on the water. You can do whatever you want.
Magnets for vandalism.
We have the Saccharisa, that's this one. This is the Navy tug. And then we have the Alert, which is the ship in front of us, the white one.
The Coast Guard Cutter Alert is a patrol, an active patrol boat, so it does law enforcement on the high seas.
Or it used to. It'd be hard pressed to catch anyone now.
All right, so that was our package from a couple of months ago. This video from today, at least part of it, the left side of your screen was from that old story back in the summer. The right side is that same boat now. That last ship, the Coast Guard Cutter Alert, has sunk. The Coast Guard thinks that people living on board left hatches open, probably by accident, which then filled the boat with rainwater and weighed the ship down. Now, the good news is before it sunk, the DEQ, the Coast Guard, and other agencies removed thousands of gallons of hazardous material, things like oil, chemicals, and batteries. So it's not leaking a bunch of pollution into the river right now, officials say. Meantime, people are still living on the Saccharissa tugboat, which sits right next to where Alert went down. The state says it doesn't have the money to remove these derelict boats before more of them sink. It also cannot afford to hoist the Alert back out of the river. So there it sits, and there it sinks. Now, after seeing all of this, you might be asking, what are the solutions? Please tell me anything. Well, if you missed our show yesterday, the city of Portland and Multnomah County unveiled a big, new, expensive plan, $38 million, all going to address our housing crisis. And that money, actually extra tax revenue, will go toward things like, they say, 400 new shelter beds at 4 sites, trash pickup, and campsite cleanup. Also up to 24 new employees focused on homeless outreach and more mental and public health services in the hardest hit areas, like, for instance, Old Town in Portland. Speaking of, if you're a regular viewer, you know we've been covering the problems plaguing Old Town for months now, particularly because people there have been pleading with the city to do something. And they CC us on a lot of their emails to the city officials. They say, get people off the streets, please. Help those clearly struggling with mental health or addiction. Please clean up the trash, combat the crime, do anything. So now that we've got this nearly $40 million plan, this big plan, big press conference yesterday, we asked the director of Blanchet House, which is in that neighborhood, what he thinks about the plan.
I think we all appreciate that the end game for a lot of people is going to be permanent supported housing. But I think there's also recognition that there are a lot of people who need help right now, and it can take some time to move people into permanent supported housing. And we're also serving a lot of people, especially here in Old Town at Blanchet House, who have a lot of significant needs and are probably a few steps away from being successful in permanent housing. So I'm really excited to see both an effort to continue that progress with permanent supported housing, but address a lot of the immediate needs, especially the behavioral and mental health needs that we're seeing down here.
It's looking like the end of an era in Portland.
It's a retail type that's fallen out of favor.
So with the Lloyd Center facing foreclosure, let's take a look back at the iconic mall in the KGW vault.
Who built the largest shopping center in the world? The Lloyd Shopping Center, right here.
When the story continues.
Lots of questions and comments on our housing content tonight. Keep them coming. Email the story at kgw.com. Use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW on Twitter. Again, our team is watching for your feedback as we speak. And now you've probably heard, I'll get there, the news about the Lloyd Center this week. A lot of you have been talking about this. Frankly, to sum up, a New York investment company says it will foreclose on the Lloyd Center because the mall's owners aren't paying their loans. It's pretty big. That firm plans to redevelop the site for, quote, residential and creative offices. So that headline in mind, we asked you on Twitter to share your memories from the Lloyd Center. SJ wrote, watching ice skaters while taking a break from Christmas shopping and munching hot caramel corn at the same time. Now I'm starving. Natalie said date night at the movie theater and then playing at the arcade. A lot of cool memories there. Keep sharing them again with the hashtag #TheStoryKGW. Now I know a lot of you remember the mall's heyday. Some of you might even remember when it was built. So that in mind, here's Tracy Berry with a look back into the KGW vault.
1958 was a record-building year for the Portland area.
KGW newsman Richard Ross delivered the headlines, and there were plenty. The Morrison Bridge opened, then the Interstate Bridge linking Portland to Vancouver, and to top it off, the Banfield Freeway was finished, laying out the perfect grid to bring people from far and wide to another development that broke ground in '58.
For the story on that, here's our news analyst, Tom McCall.
Industrial, commercial, and residential building worth a whopping $140 million got underway in Portland and vicinity during the past 12 months. The largest the largest project of the lot was the $22 million Lloyd Center on Portland's Near East Side.
Lloyd Center, Portland's first shopping mall, would create quite a stir. opening just 2 years later on August 1st, 1960. An open-air wonder, 3 stories tall, boasting 100 stores and a skating rink with plenty of parking right in the city. Presidential candidate Richard Nixon, campaigning there, proclaimed it an example of America's greatness.
If you think the United States has stood still, who built the largest shopping center in the world? The Lloyd Shopping Center, right here.
So crazy to see that video. If you have any ideas for the vault, send them our way to thestory@kgw.com. All right, coming up next, we're going to answer one of the big questions that you've been writing in about. It's about school boards. And some of you want to know, why are these meetings open to everyone, including anti-vaccine protesters? We'll explain when the story continues. Welcome back. We wanted to revisit a story from last week because we got a really good question about it from you at home. We told you last week about the way that school board meetings here in the Northwest and frankly across the country are just getting wild. And then the very next day, chaos broke out at this Portland Public School Board meeting. Anti-vaccine groups and far-right groups from across the state gathered to protest a proposed vaccine mandate for all PPS students. A lot of people in that crowd, it's worth noting, do not have kids in PPS. A lot of them don't even live in Portland. The meeting, regardless, had to be stopped and moved online because so many people in the crowd refused to put on a mask. Now, the board has decided as a result of this that all their meetings will be held for the rest of the month will be held virtually. And that made one of our viewers ask this question. Why does PPS allow people who don't have kids in PPS schools onto the school board meetings or into these meetings? Zoom link to all the parents who have kids in school and only allow those people in. Again, that came into our email. It's a great question. So several of you thought that the board meetings should only be open to the people who have kids in the district. And the answer as to why that can't happen, experts tell us and officials tell us, is that public schools function as a larger part of our democracy, and the idea that if our community educates children well, they will go on to improve our society is at the core of that. And because school boards make so many decisions for our kids, they are held accountable to the entire public, not just parents. The entire public also pays for the public schools through taxes and levies and bonds. So you have a right to know how your money is being spent, whether you have a kid there or not. Under Oregon law, and most other states for that matter, most school board meetings have to be open to the public so the public can be aware of what's going on in the schools that they fund. Now, here's the thing. A meeting that is open to the public does not necessarily mean that it's open to public comment. That is big. This is not open mic night for your vaccine conspiracy theories. It is a public attendance law, not a public participation law. Most school boards, though, will take public comment on the things they propose and they vote on, but they're allowed to limit who can comment and how long they can talk for. Board meetings also can be closed to the public if they go into executive session, but the board members are only allowed to discuss specific topics under those circumstances. But again, education is a key component of democracy, and that's why everyone pays taxes for schools, not just parents, and it's why everyone in a certain area votes for any new school funding, and everyone votes for school board members. We all vote on all of this, and it's why anyone in that area or zone or district can run for the school board. You don't have to have a connection with the schools, and everyone can, again, go to the board meetings and see what's going on. It's a great question, though. A lot of you had it. Keep sending in those questions, comments, concerns, all that good stuff to thestory@kgw.com. Find us on social media. We're going to finish the show right after this. Let's talk Hey Help really quick before we wrap up. This week, we're asking you to consider donating to Discover Your Northwest to help them repair recent vandalism at Coldwater Lake Recreational Area at Mount St. Helens. Last month, as you can see, toilets in the restrooms were smashed and sinks were also damaged. So to donate to these repairs, hold your phone's camera up to this QR code. It'll take you to the donation page. You can also just go to kgw.com/heyhelp. In the meantime, pick up your phone, follow us on Twitter, follow us us on Instagram, email thestory@kgw.com. Our team is watching as we speak. That being said, that is the end of the story. So let's bring in Laurel Porter for the news at 6:30. Hey, Laurel.
Hey, Maggie, thank you. We're hearing from one of the survivors of Portland's rising gun violence. Her life has changed pretty drastically since she was shot in downtown Portland this summer. The news at 6:30 starts now.
This is KGW News
It was
at 6:30.
And my bones were shattered. It was like pretzel sticks in a bag. It was crushed.
Tracy Carmen was shot while doing what so many people do, enjoying a night in downtown Portland. Now the 36-year-old can't walk without assistance and can't make a living. Thank you for joining us. Tracy's case remains unsolved, and tonight